The day I almost lost my job was the same day I realized I had never actually seen two people fall in love before. Not real love. Not the kind that survives concrete walls and steel doors and a system designed to grind everything soft out of a person. I had worked at Piedmont Federal Correctional Facility in Charlotte, North Carolina for 15 years. I thought I had seen everything. I was wrong. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you emotional stories that stay with you. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you're returning, thank you. Your support means everything. Now, stay until the end, drop a comment with your thoughts, and let's begin. My name is Darius Hammond. I am 43 years old. I have worked as a corrections officer at Piedmont Federal Correctional Facility in Charlotte, North Carolina since I was 28. Before that, I did 2 years at a county jail in Greensboro, and before that, I served in the Army. I tell you this, so you understand I am not a man who gets easily surprised. I have seen things in this building that would make most people's legs go weak. I have watched men fall apart in slow motion over years. I have watched families stop showing up. I have watched hope leave a person's eyes the way water leaves a drain, slow at first and then all at once. I thought I had a handle on human nature. I thought I understood what this place did to people and what people did to themselves inside it. Then Grant Weston arrived, and everything I thought I knew got real quiet. Grant came in on a Tuesday in late autumn. I remember because the heat in the East Wing had gone out 2 days before, and we were all moving around in layers waiting for maintenance to fix it. Most new inmates come in one of two ways. They come in loud, all chest and noise, trying to show everyone they are not afraid. Or they come in folded up, eyes down, trying to disappear. Grant Weston came in neither way. He walked through processing like a man who had made a decision and was living with it. Calm. Not the fake kind of calm people perform. The real kind that sits in the shoulders and the jaw. He was tall, white, mid-30s, hazel eyes that move around a room the way a person moves when they're used to being in charge of things. He had the kind of face that probably looked good in a suit behind a big desk. Here he looked like everyone else. A number, a case file, a bunk assignment. I pulled his file the way I pull every new intake file. Grant Allen Weston, 36 years old. Convicted of wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. Former CEO of a real estate technology company out of Atlanta, Georgia. The company had been worth close to $400 million at its peak. According to the file and everything that had been in the news, Grant had been moving investor money in ways that were not legal, propping up numbers that were not real. And when it all came apart, a lot of people lost a lot of money. He got 7 years. With good behavior, he was looking at 5. I did not feel sorry for him. I did not feel anything about him. That is the job. You cannot carry feelings about every man that walks through that door, or you will not last a year, let alone 15. What I will say is that Grant Weston was quiet in a way that made him easy to work around. He did not cause problems. He kept to himself. He read a lot. Thick books with small print that he moved through fast. He worked out in the yard every morning before most men were awake. He wrote letters, real ones on paper, and he received them back. Whoever was on the outside writing to him, they were consistent. He never missed mail call, and he never looked disappointed when something came. The first few months, he had a rotation of attorneys coming through. Different faces, different briefcases, all of them moving fast and talking low and leaving with stacks of paper. Grant always came back from those legal visits the same way he left them. Steady. Whatever they were telling him, good or bad, it did not show on his face in any way I could read. Then one Wednesday morning, about 8 months into his sentence, a new attorney showed up. I was on visiting room duty that day, which I had worked enough times that it was automatic. You stand, you watch, you make sure nothing gets passed, nothing gets said that should not be said, nothing happens that should not happen. You are furniture with eyes. That is the job. I signed her in at the front. Naomi Calloway, attorney at law out of Raleigh, North Carolina. She was black, mid-30s, beautiful in a way that was not trying to be. She had natural hair pulled back, edges laid, a burgundy blazer over a white blouse, and a kind of posture that said she had been underestimated enough times that she stopped waiting for people to catch up. She carried a leather bag that was worn at the handles from real use, not for looks. She signed the visitor log without looking up and said thank you to the officer at the desk in a voice that was warm but not soft. There's a difference. I showed her to visiting room 3 and went to get Weston. He did not know who was coming. His regular attorney, a man named Fitch, had been handling everything, whatever the arrangement was. Naomi Calloway was new, and Grant did not know her face when he walked in and saw her sitting at the table with a file open in front of her. He stopped for just half a second. Not long enough for most people to notice. I noticed because noticing things is my entire job. She stood and extended her hand. Mr. Weston, I'm Naomi Calloway. I've been brought in to handle your appeal. Mr. Fitch is dealing with a health issue. I've reviewed your full case file, and I'm up to speed. Grant shook her hand and sat down across from her. How long have you had the file? For days. And you're up to speed in 4 days. She did not flinch. I've been doing this for 11 years. For days was enough. Something moved across Grant's face. Not a smile exactly. More like the beginning of one that he decided to keep to himself. He opened his hands on the table. All right, where do you want to start? That first meeting was professional and efficient. Naomi talked. Grant listened, asked sharp questions, and she answered every single one without hesitation. She knew his case the way you know something you have studied hard and also understood deeply. Not just the facts, but the shape of it, where it was weak, where it had been mishandled, where there was room to move. Grant watched her the whole time with an attention that was focused and quiet. Not the way men sometimes look at a woman they find attractive and are trying not to show it. This was different. This was the look of a person who is genuinely surprised to find someone that capable sitting across from them and is recalibrating. When the hour was up, she closed the file, stood, and said she would be back the following Wednesday with a draft motion. Grant stood too. Ms. Calloway. She paused. Thank you, he said. I mean that. She gave him one nod. Do what I tell you, and we'll get you out of here. She left. Grant came back to the wing. I watched him sit on his bunk for a while before picking up his book. He did not read it. He just held it. I did not think much of it that night. If you are feeling this story, hype it so others can find it. Comment where you are watching from. Now back to the story. Naomi came back the following Wednesday exactly when she said she would. And the Wednesday after that. And the one after that. For the first month, it was strictly business. She would come in with her worn leather bag, spread her papers on the table, and work through everything with Grant like they were building something together brick by brick. The appeal was complicated. The original trial had gaps in it, places where the defense had not pushed hard enough, witnesses who had not been cross-examined the way they should have been. Naomi had found 3 of those gaps in her first 4 days with the file. By the end of the first month, she had found 6. I watched every single visit from my post by the door. That was my assignment, and I took it seriously. But I will be honest with you. Somewhere around the 4th or 5th visit, I stopped watching the way I watched 2 parties in a legal meeting and started watching the way you watch something you cannot quite name yet, but know is worth paying attention to. It started with small things. Grant started arriving at the visiting room before I even brought him down. I would go to his wing to escort him, and he would already be standing near the door, not pacing, not anxious, just ready. His shirt would be cleaner than usual, not dressed up. There was nothing to dress up in, but you could tell he had made an effort with what he had. I noticed that. I did not say anything about it. Naomi started arriving a few minutes earlier each week. The first visit, she had been exactly on time. By the 6th visit, she was signing in 20 minutes before her scheduled slot. The officer at the front desk mentioned it to me once, casual, not making anything of it. I nodded and kept walking. Inside the visiting room, the dynamic was shifting in ways that were hard to put into words, but easy to feel if you were paying attention. They still worked. The legal work was real and serious, and Naomi was genuinely fighting for this man's freedom in a way that went beyond billing hours. But there were pauses now, small ones. A question Grant would ask that was not exactly about the case. A response from Naomi that went a sentence longer than it needed to. Laughter, quiet and surprised, like both of them kept catching themselves doing it and did not know what to do about that. One afternoon, Naomi mentioned in passing that she had driven 3 hours that morning to be there because her regular Wednesday schedule had been moved and she had rearranged for other appointments to keep his visit on the calendar. She said it matter-of-factly, like it was just logistics. Grant went very still when she said it. Not obvious still. The kind of still that lives in the eyes. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said, and went back to the papers. He watched her for a moment before going back to the papers, too. I shifted my weight at the door and looked at the wall. By the third month, the visits had a rhythm to them that felt less like attorney and client, and more like two people who had built something private inside a place that was designed to make privacy impossible. They had their own shorthand. Inside references to things from earlier conversations. Grant would say something and Naomi would finish the thought without effort, and they would both act like that was completely normal. Maybe they did not notice it. I noticed it. I also noticed that Naomi had started bringing things. Small things, all within regulations. A printed article about a case similar to Grant's that had been successfully appealed in a federal court in Virginia. A folded note with a list of questions she wanted him to think about before their next meeting. One she brought 2 cups of coffee from a vending machine in the lobby, one for her and one pushed across the table to him, without ceremony. Grant looked at that cup for a second before picking it up. He drank the whole thing even though the vending machine coffee at Piedmont tasted like hot water filtered through an old sock. I know because I had made that mistake myself more than once. They were careful. They were always careful. Nothing crossed a line in any way I could write up. No inappropriate contact. No violation of protocol. But there's a kind of closeness that does not require touching, and these two had found it inside a 12-foot room with a corrections officer standing 4 feet away. That takes something. I was not sure what to call it then. I know what to call it now. It was a Thursday in early winter when things shifted in a way that was no longer small. Naomi had come in that day with news. I could tell from the way she walked in that she was carrying something. Not bad news, not exactly, but the kind of news that changes the shape of a conversation before you even start it. She sat down, opened her bag, and slid a document across the table to Grant. He looked at it. "Read it slowly. Read it again." "The motion was accepted," she said. "The court agreed to review the appeal. We have a hearing date." Grant did not move for a long moment. His jaw tightened and released. He set the paper down flat on the table with both hands like he was making sure it was real. "How long?" he asked. 4 months. Maybe 5. Depends on the docket. He nodded slowly. Then he looked up at her, and something in his face was different from anything I had seen on him since he arrived. The steadiness was still there, but underneath it something had loosened. Like a door that had been sealed for a long time had just opened a crack, and light was coming through. "Naomi," he said. He had started using her first name sometime in the 2nd month. She had started using his a week after that. She looked at him. "I don't know how to thank you for this." "You don't have to thank me yet," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were flat on the table, and she was very still. "Wait until we win." "We're going to win," he said. Not like a wish. Like a fact he had decided on. She held his gaze for a moment, and then looked down at her papers. Her mouth curved just slightly at the corner. She did not let it become a full smile, but it was there. I looked at the ceiling. That was the day I started paying a different kind of attention. Not the professional kind. The kind where you already know something is coming, and you are bracing for what it is going to cost you when it does. The 4 months between the hearing date and the actual court date were the longest I had watched 2 people navigate in a long time. Naomi was coming twice a week now. Wednesdays and Fridays. She had filed paperwork to increase her visit frequency due to the active appeal, and the administration approved it without question because it was legitimate. Everything was legitimate. That was the thing about these two. They never gave me anything I could point to directly. They never gave themselves anything they could point to directly. And yet every single person on my shift knew something was happening in visiting room 3 on Wednesdays and Fridays. Nobody said it out loud. That is how these things work. You know, and you don't say, and you watch and you wait. Grant was different during those months. Not dramatically different. He was still quiet. still kept to himself, still worked out in the yard every morning before dawn. But there was something in him that had come back online. He read faster. He engaged more during rec time, not loud, just present in a way he had not been before. The men on his wing noticed too. One of them, an older guy named Terrell who had been inside long enough to read People Way Some Folks read weather, told me once in the hallway, casual as anything, Weston got something to look forward to. He did not say what. He did not need to. Naomi on her end was carrying more weight than she let show in the visiting room. I knew this because I had started paying attention to the small things she brought in with her each visit. There were shadows under her eyes some Fridays that were not there on Wednesdays. Her bag got heavier as the hearing got closer, stuffed with briefs and printed case law and handwritten notes in the margins of everything. She was working this case the way you work something personal, not just professionally responsible, personally invested. There is a difference, and it is not subtle if you know what to look for. One Friday she came in, and she was off, not visibly upset, not distracted exactly, but there was something tight in the way she sat down and set her bag on the floor. Grant noticed before she said a word. I watched his eyes move over her face the way you check something you are worried about. What happened? He asked. Nothing. Let's go over the witness list. Naomi. She looked up. What happened? He said again. Same words. Completely different weight. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, one of my other clients. A kid, 20 years old. His case didn't go the way it should have today. She stopped there. She did not elaborate. She did not need to. The way she said it carried the whole story inside it. Grant did not say I'm sorry or that's terrible or any of the things people say when they do not know what else to do. He said, tell me about him. She looked at him. What? The kid. Tell me about him. And she did, slowly at first and then with more detail. The 20-year-old's name, where he was from, what his family was like, how hard she had worked the case, and where it come apart and why. Grant listened the whole time without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, you're going to keep fighting for him. It was not a question. Yeah, she said, I am, because that's who you are. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face that she did not try to hide and did not try to show. It was just there. We need to go over the witness list, she said. Okay, he said. They went over the witness list. I stood at the door and studied the middle distance and thought about a lot of nothing. The hearing date came on a gray morning in late winter. Naomi had been in the day before to go over everything one final time. They had worked through the full session without stopping. No pauses, no personal conversation. All business. When she stood to leave, Grant stood too, and they looked at each other across the table. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he said. She nodded once and left. Grant walked back to the wing without an escort because I had stepped aside to sign something at the desk, and he knew the way. When I caught up to him, he was already at his bunk, sitting on the edge of it, forearms on his knees, staring at the floor. Not anxious, not afraid. The way a person looks when they have done everything they can do, and now they are just waiting for the world to respond. I did not hear directly what happened in that courtroom the next day. I was on shift. But I heard about it the way you hear about things in a place like this, through the movement of information that travels faster than any official channel. The appeal was granted, not fully resolved, not walked out the door free and clear, but the original conviction on 2 of the 3 charges was overturned. The third charge, the one that carried the most weight, was sent back for retrial. Grant's attorney team, which now meant Naomi at the center of it, had argued successfully that the original trial had been compromised by prosecutorial misconduct in the evidence handling. The judge had agreed. The retrial was scheduled for 5 months out. Grant's bail was reinstated pending that retrial. He would be out within the week. When I came back on shift, the next morning the news had already moved through the wing. I went to Grant's cell to give him the official notification from the warden's office. Standard procedure. He was sitting on his bunk reading. He looked up when I came in. I handed him the paper. He read it, set it down on the bunk beside him. You okay? I asked. I do not usually ask that. It came out before I thought about it. He looked up at me. Yeah, he said. I am. I nodded and turned to leave. Darius. I stopped. He almost never used my name. She's coming tomorrow, he said. One more visit before I process out. I looked at him for a moment. I know, I said. I'm on visiting room duty. Something in his face shifted in a way I cannot fully describe. Quiet and full at the same time. Good, he said. I walked back down the hall and did not examine what I was feeling too closely because I was at work, and I had learned a long time ago that examining feelings at work is how you end up making decisions that cost you. But I knew what was coming tomorrow, and I knew that whatever was, it was going to land in the middle of my shift, and I was going to have to decide in real time what kind of officer I was going to be about it. Naomi arrived the next morning at 9:15. She was not in her burgundy blazer this time. She had on a deep red dress, simple and clean, and her natural hair was down around her face instead of pulled back. She still carried the worn leather bag, but it looked lighter than usual. Less paper, less armor. She signed at the front, and I walked her to visiting room 3 the same way I had walked her there every Wednesday and Friday for the better part of a year. She sat down. I went to get Grant. He was already waiting by the wing door. His shirt was as clean and pressed as a man can get a shirt inside a federal facility. He had shaved. He stood straight in a way that had nothing to do with posture, and everything to do with the particular feeling of a man who is about to walk towards something he has been thinking about for a long time. I did not say anything. He did not say anything. We walked down the hall to visiting room 3, and I opened the door, and he went in. Naomi stood when he entered. That was new. She had never stood before. It just happened, automatic, like her body made the decision before her mind caught up. Grant stopped just inside the door for half a second the way he had stopped the very first time he saw her, that first Wednesday when she had spread her papers on the table and told him 4 days was enough. Except this time it was not recalibration on his face. This time it was something open and unguarded that he did not try to put away. He walked to the table. She was still standing. They were close, closer than the usual distance of papers and legal pad between them. You did it, he said. We did it, she said. He shook his head slowly. No, you did it. I just answered your questions. She almost smiled. You answered them well. They stood there for a moment in the particular silence of two people who have run out of professional things to say and are standing on the edge of everything else. I was at my post by the door, 4 feet away. Might as well have been 4 miles. They had forgotten I was there the way people forget furniture. I'm out Friday, Grant said. I know. After the retrial process wraps up, I'm looking at full exoneration. Your motion was airtight. I know that too, she said. He looked at her, really looked at her the way he had been not quite letting himself look at her for the better part of a year. What happens now, he asked, and it was not about the case. They both knew it was not about the case. Naomi's chin lifted slightly the way it did when she was thinking through something carefully. I'm still your attorney of record until the retrial concludes, she said. And after that? She did not answer right away. The silence stretched out long enough that I became very interested in the corner of the ceiling. After that, she said slowly, I don't know. Grant took one small step closer to her. Not enough to cross any line. Just enough to close the distance between almost and something. He reached out and with 2 fingers, gentle and deliberate, he lifted her chin so she was looking directly at him. Her eyes went wide for just a moment, not from fear, from a particular shock of being seen completely by someone you have been trying not to let see you. I know, he said quietly. His voice was low and certain the way it got when he was stating something he had already decided. When I get out, I'm keeping you for a week straight. The room was completely silent. Naomi stared at him. Her lips parted slightly. 1 beat passed. 2. Then something in her face that had been held carefully in place for 11 months released all at once, and she laughed. 1 real, full, completely unguarded laugh that filled that cold gray room like it had no business being there and did not care. Grant smiled. The real kind. The kind I had not seen on his face once in the 11 months he had been inside these walls. I turned and looked directly at the door in front of me. My jaw was tight. Not from anger. From the effort of keeping my own face neutral, when everything in that room behind me was the opposite of neutral. I had a decision to make. What I had just witnessed was not a violation. His fingers under her chin for 3 seconds. A statement. Her laughter. None of it was anything I could write in a report with a straight face. But it was something. And in 15 years, I had learned that something always becomes something else if you let it. And it was my job to make sure some things did not become something else's inside this building. I also had 15 years of watching this place take things from people. Good things. Real things. Things that had no business being taken. I had watched men lose their families one missed visit at a time. I had watched hope get processed out of people as efficiently as their personal belongings at intake. I had watched the system do what the system does, which is grind. And I had watched these two people, for 11 months, inside 12 square feet of concrete and fluorescent light, build something that the system had no category for and no protocol to handle. I turned back around. Grant had stepped back to the appropriate distance. Naomi had her hands flat on the table. They were both looking at me with the particular expression of two people waiting for a consequence. I looked at Grant. I looked at Naomi. I looked at my watch. "You've got 18 minutes left on this visit," I said. "I'm going to step into the hallway to check on something. I'll be back in 5. I walked out and closed the door behind me. I stood in the hallway with my arms crossed and my eyes on the far wall, and I thought about my 15 years of my pension and my record and the report I would have to file at the end of shift. I thought about Terrell saying Weston got something to look forward to. I thought about Naomi driving 3 hours on a rearranged schedule to make sure she was there every Wednesday. I thought about a cup of vending machine coffee pushed across a table, without ceremony, and a man drinking the whole thing. After 5 minutes, I walked back in. They were sitting across from each other, papers between them, talking in low voices. Normal. Professional. Except that Naomi's eyes were still bright in a way they had not been when she walked in, and Grant was sitting like a man who had just put down something very heavy he had been carrying for a very long time. I took my post by the door. Nobody said anything about the 5 minutes. When the visit ended and Naomi stood to leave, she picked up her bag and looked at Grant one last time. He looked back at her. Whatever passed between them in that moment was not mine to name or record or report. She walked out. I escorted Grant back to the wing. At his cell door, he stopped and turned to me. "Darius." "Don't," I said. He closed his mouth. "Friday you process out." I said, "What happens after Friday is none of my business." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Thank you," he said. "Not for the 5 minutes. For the whole 11 months of seeing something true happening in front of me and choosing to be a person about it instead of just an officer." I walked back down the hall. I filed my end of shift report that evening. It said what it always said. Visit conducted without incident. No violations observed. No reportable events. I went home to my apartment in Charlotte, made myself a plate of leftover baked chicken and rice my neighbor Miss Patricia had sent over, sat down at my kitchen table, and thought about what I had spent 15 years believing about this place and the people inside it. I had believed that Piedmont Federal Correctional Facility was a place where things ended, where possibilities came to stop, where the distance between who you were and who you might become stretched out so long it eventually snapped. Grant Weston walked out of those doors on a Friday morning in early spring. I was not on shift that day. I heard about it the way I heard about most things, through the current that moves faster than paperwork. What I heard was that there was a woman waiting in the parking lot, burgundy blazer, worn leather bag over one shoulder, natural hair down around her face. What I heard was that when he came through those doors, she was leaning against a car with her arms crossed, trying to look like she was not nervous, and doing a bad job of it. What I heard was that he walked straight to her and said something that made her laugh again, that same real, unguarded laugh, and that whatever he said, she did not argue with it. I do not know what happened after that. That is not my story to know. What I know is what I saw for 11 months inside visiting room 3. What I know is that two people found each other in the least likely place, built something real out of legal pads and vending machine coffee, and carefully observed professional distance, and refused to let concrete walls be the end of it. I have worked at Piedmont Federal Correctional Facility for 15 years. I have seen a lot of things end inside these walls. That was the first time I ever watched something begin. What would you rate the story? Drop 0 to 10 in the comments right now. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more emotional journeys every day. And if it truly touched your heart, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support helps us create more stories like this. Every contribution, big or small, means the world. Ready for the next story? It is even more dramatic than this one. Click now. Thank you for being part of this journey.